Welcome back. We are the Brothers Mahoney. I am Michael.
And I'm James.
And today we are discussing the 7th episode of the first season of the revival of Doctor Who, being The Long Game.
The Long Game is written by Russell T Davies, as has been a lot of the stories in this season. But to be fair, he is the showrunner right now. But written by Russell T Davies and came out May 7th, 2005.
At least in the UK.
Yeah, in the UK, this is true. And it has the companions Rose, as season 1 did, and interestingly enough, Adam, who the Doctor picked up after Rose convinced him. It took her a while too because the Doctor was not really buying it. Rose had to try 3 different methods to get the Doctor to actually decide, okay, fine, Adam can come. But Adam Mitchell, who was working for Henry Van Staten in Dalek.
And speaking of Rose, I think she threw her chips on the table poorly because, Adam did not necessarily pan out, but that's one of the many parts that we will discuss later on.
Oh, we might discuss. I mean, really, what did you say? Adam tried.
You can do or do not, there is no try. That's what my homeboy Yoda says.
I do so like Star Trek.
Oh, snap. It's getting real up in this.
Right. The plot for this story is as follows. The Doctor, Rose, and Adam come to the year 200,000, which is a bit more in the future than 2012 is, certainly right now. And they explore a civilization that is not at all what the Doctor thinks it should be. It should be, as the Doctor knows it, the fourth great and wonderful human empire. But alas, nothing is as the Doctor thinks it should be. And the Doctor has to figure out why, while Adam has his own ideas on what to do while in this future.
Yeah, and as James said, it takes place in the year 200,000, which the Doctor describes as the, quote, fourth great and bountiful human empire. At this point in time in history, Earth is covered with mega cities. That's why it's 5 moons. I'm not sure where the other 4 came from.
Well, I think the creature from Kill the Moon maybe had some more eggs.
Yes. Kill the Moon was certainly a...
I mean, to be fair, you don't remember that one at all.
No, I don't. That's why it's being vague. It adds to the charm.
Kill the Moon was a god, people.
Yeah.
But we'll get there.
Oh, well, yeah. Eventually. But not only does it have mega cities and 5 moons, it also has a population of 96 billion, which is moderately higher than what we have now.
Yeah, I think we're around 8 billion now.
Yeah, it is impressive. But they have 96 billion, so it's even more impressive. And the empire itself, the human empire, stretches across 1 million planets, as the Doctor describes. So that sounds classy. And we actually, this isn't the first time we've encountered the idea of a human empire, not by a long shot. In multiple classic Who stories, they came across humans out in deep space.
I do wonder when the Macroteer took place, actually, because that was a human colony.
Yeah.
But so in The Mutants, which was a John Portly story, which actually Michael and I rather like, even though for some reason it seems to be in the last show Aslan of Portly stories for a lot of people. But that is near the end of a human empire because they're pulling back to Earth. They're just having, I think, pollution problems. And which is not, I think, how empires work. Usually they just colonize to keep colonizing. But I guess they're being kind in that one. The Mutants takes place around the 2900, so that's way, way in the past compared to this. And also, the Doctor calls this the fourth great and bountiful human empire. Apparently, at the very least, the second great and bountiful human empire was during the Daleks' master plan in that time period. And there's another note of interest. Just to put this in a relative comparison to other stories, Planet of the Ood, with the Ood being slayed by the human empire, which I believe there's an empire at that point. I believe it mentions that in Planet of the Ood at least. Maybe not the Impossible Planet, but in Planet of the Ood. And that took place in just the 4100s. So after the Mutants, timeline-wise. But again, long before this one. I suppose probably the end of the world is one that is among the farthest future thing we've seen, but 200,000 is pretty far.
Hey, let's not forget Utopia.
Well, no, I'm talking about like that we've covered so far, though.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, Utopia took place just a bit outside of the norm.
And was it now this is when we get to the things that I don't remember much at all. Was it a Peter Capaldi story with me that took place like in the last, like in just like a small room, and it's apparently like the last place in the galaxy?
I think you're actually confusing your stories. There was a scene with the 12th Doctor and me, but there's also a scene in Hyde with the 12th Doctor and a supposed relative or a descendant of Danny Pink. So you might be confusing those two in your mind.
Well, I guess once we get 9 seasons in, we can get ours straightened out.
Apparently so. 2 separate episodes, by the way.
That's what they say. You know what else do they say? That everybody has philosophies. And given the Doctor's many years, he has a philosophy on time travel. And it pretty much, it comes across somewhat freeform. So,
I'm kind of privileged.
yeah, well, they land on Satellite 5, Adam, Rose, and the Doctor. And pretty soon the Doctor can see something's wrong. There are these vendors selling the wares if people have coin. And it's supposed to be a place of fine cuisine, and it's supposed to be advanced, and this just seems, well, not particularly advanced.
Yeah, it's supposed to be advanced and multicultural. Not only multicultural, but multi-species. You know, aliens are supposed to be here. It is 200,000. It's long time in the future. Aliens are supposed to just be among the rest of the humans, or as Lady Cassandra would say, the quasi-humans or proto-humans.
The digi-humans.
The digi-humans, yes. Oh,
Yeah,
human is.
But on Satellite 5, it seems like they're just humans. Just humans, and that's it.
And apparently Krankborg which is a reference to the Iron Legion, a comic story of the Fourth Doctor.
It's just funny because I actually think I collect comic books, and I have Marvel Premiere issue 57, and I think that's the first American appearance in comic books of the Doctor. It's a Tom Baker's toy, and I do believe it's an Iron Legion, like part 1 thing. So
yeah, I think I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Yeah.
So that's fun. I've actually read them sometime. Adam is somewhat overwhelmed. I mean, if you compare what Rose went through during the end of the Warlord to what Adam's going through in this one, Adam really doesn't have much to complain about, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is true. It was a lot more dangerous with what Rose was dealing with. In some ways, it was almost similar because no one in the end of the Warlord knew there was any danger. I guess Lady Cassandra did. But no one knew there was any danger until halfway through the episode. And the thing is, with these stories, like, they're only 43, 44 minutes. So I guess maybe that's reasonable. But in a lot of stories, the dangers are pretty apparent to people, generally speaking, early on. I think that's not unfair to say. I'm not sure. But in this one, basically no one knew there was any danger at all until the very end. Because it was a society that didn't question things. So there were a lot of obvious questions Rose and the Doctor had that literally no one else even thought to ask about the civilization they were living in.
Yeah, which is something that we will tackle a bit later on. But in terms of the culture shock that Rose experienced in comparison to Adam's got no leg to stand on, pretty much. I mean, he's freaked out because he's on the satellite and he saw Earth. Ooh-wee. At least everybody around him's human.
Yeah, Rose did not get that pleasure. Well, I mean, pleasure. I think the Face of Boy... Hey, the Face of Boy actually was made a reference in this one, too. There was a reference to the Face of Boy in this one, now that I think about it. He was apparently pregnant. So...
Courtesy of the Bad Wolf News channel on the side note.
Yeah, and I wonder if that has anything to do with anything. I don't know why we're playing coy. We've seen this season. And Adam just faints when he sees the Earth, and maybe he sees a mega city or two, I don't know, from the satellite. And it's not a very impressive sign. Like, Rose went through worse, and she did faint. Now, she did need to leave the room for a bit and have a chat with a lovely blue woman, who I don't remember who the actress was, but she was a pretty good scene. And then she died, alas. But no, Adam just faints. So, well done, Adam. Good job.
I mean, it would be a difficult situation for most people. I mean, look at Mickey.
Yeah, but Mickey holds up, after the first story. Like, he's fine. He's actually rather good at that stuff.
It's not like Adam had a whole bunch of experience coming into this. He's like in a different room in the Daleks attacking other people. For the most part, he was never in any danger during this story. Well, I mean, unless you can't be in close proximity to a Dalek, it's dangerous, in which case he was always in danger.
Well, he was always in danger because he worked for Henry Van Staten, who would just mind white people in San who live in Arizona or something.
Yeah, but that was probably in the contract.
I mean, maybe. Henry Van Staten sounds like a type of guy who would have had a contract here, just do what he wants.
Hey, that's America for you, though.
Yeah, apparently he picks the president in 2012.
There you go.
So he chose Obama again.
Good choice. So Adam does want to try to acclimate to this society. The Doctor's able to give him some form of money, the type of thing they use as money. Then it looks like just a metal block type thing. And Adam asks the Doctor how it works, to which the Doctor sort of replies with his philosophy. And I'll just sort of quote it, "Go and find out. Stop nagging me. The thing is, time travel is like visiting Paris. You can't just read the guidebook. You've got to throw yourself in, eat the food, use the wrong verbs. Stop asking questions. Go and do it." So it's not surprising coming from the Doctor. Like James said, it's sort of, I don't know, privilege. I mean, if you don't know anything about the culture, how can you just be expected to jump in and be safe? I mean, that's exactly what Evelyn Smythe tried to do.
Yeah,
In the American Conspiracy, and she almost got killed because of it. It's this exact philosophy.
How many times has the Doctor just gotten in a situation where he has no idea what's happening, and because of it, he almost dies? At least the first Doctor, for all of his flaws, did radiation checks before he left the TARDIS. He did them a lot.
Although,
Him and Susan.
to be fair, he probably shouldn't have trusted Susan with the last radiation check.
Which radiation check?
The one following the unearthly child into the Daleks.
I mean, it worked. He just didn't stay there long enough. But he used to be safe. And I mean, look at Matt Smith in, what was it, The Girl Who Waited?
Mm-hmm.
Where Amy gets trapped in a medical facility because there's a absolutely deadly virus that devastated the entire planet or something to that effect. And the Doctor just didn't know about it because to him, the planet's always a nice planet. He didn't think, if I come at this time period, there might be a virus going on. And of course, Amy gets trapped, and we're going way in the future, but Amy gets trapped, and then, Roy's, of course, has tried about it. And he, berates the Doctor, as Roy did often, and is usually right about, and says that, the Doctor's just being unsafe. And the Doctor's like, well, that's not how I travel. And he says he doesn't say it in quite as offhand a way. He says it a bit angrily because he's trying to defend himself. And Roy's like, well, maybe it should be. And Roy's right. Maybe the Doctor should look into situations before he gets involved in them. The Savage Doctor...
even better, he can get involved in whatever he likes. It's his choice. But before he gets other people involved in them, he should look into it.
Well, that's true. But I mean, I suppose the Seventh Doctor did, and then he just, did coups. So I guess it depends on what you want to do with the information you have.
But to be fair, I think when H went with the Doctor, H knew what she was getting into. It was like she was with him as a freedom fighter, so that sort of makes sense to me.
That does make sense, yeah. And it's funny, because this story was actually apparently originally written by Russell T Davies and sent in during the end of Classic Who. So it could have been an hour and a half, well, maybe it would have just been 3 episodes. It could have been a Sylvester McCoy story, so it would have been more fleshed out. Of course, it would have been different than it is now. But apparently it was the script Russell T Davies wrote for Sylvester McCoy. So that would have been fascinating. It actually sounds like a perfect Sylvester McCoy story.
Yeah, and I think one of the problems that we'll talk about later is I like a lot of the ideas of the story. I just wish it was just fleshed out a bit more. So if this had been a McCoy story, or done in a serialized fashion, I think it would have worked out better. And I'll say this, and I know that to modern Doctor Who fans, this is sort of hard to comprehend. I actually wish Doctor Who would go back to the way they did in Classic Who with serialized. They had 24-minute episodes 3, 4, 5 times a week to cover a whole story. I wish they would do that because they can add so much more depth to the stories that way. I know some people had issues with some episodes feeling more like filler, but to be honest, I would 100% rather have filler episodes of a story than have a rushed story. 100%. So I'll be okay with that.
I could do with other type of filler that they had during Potter's era, because those were just too long.
Yeah, but they can learn from their mistakes, and they probably wouldn't do it, given the budgets, they probably wouldn't do it quite the same way anyway. But just the style of storytelling, serialized, I think, works better with Doctor Who than does this whole rushed format.
It does, because like most of the, well, okay, let me rephrase this. Most of the 2-parters in the first 5 seasons or so are really good, generally speaking, and it's because they have more time to tell their story.
Yeah, and I don't have a number off the top of my head, but I can imagine there is at least 20 NuWho Doctor Who stories that could have benefited from being longer. And I think The Long Game's definitely one of them.
Yeah, The Long Game could have been a nice, cool mystery that if it just had, a longer time to breathe, and The Beast Below could have done the same thing. There's so many NuWho stories that would have worked very well just being not a bit longer, but just being longer. It's not a detriment.
Could you imagine the God Complex being longer? Just It could be like one of those bizarre McCoy ones. It could be
actually,
fascinating.
I think the Gaia complex worked at the length it was. It took me a while, but the has grown on me a lot. So I think that one's actually fine.
But just the idea that the Doctor's philosophy is pretty much equivalent to Shia LaBeouf saying, just do it, just cracks me up. It's all right for him, but when you get other people involved and you sort of throw them into a role, just, oh, hey, go out here and just do it. I mean, I do blame Arden for his actions in the story, but he wasn't given a whole lot of guidance either. So I do feel a small amount of sympathy for him.
Well, in the original script, apparently, the entire reason he wanted to do it wasn't even for monetary gain. It was because his father had some disease that they didn't have the cure of. That's apparently what the script writer said. Well, I guess Russell T Davies is the script writer. So it's in one of the original scripts of this episode, and it's actually talked about on the commentary. He actually had kind of maybe not noble, but he didn't have horrible reasons for doing what he did. But they cut that part out because I don't think they want anybody to sympathize with Adam.
I think if we should mention, I didn't even think about this. We do have all of these. Oh, let me finish. We have most NuWho on DVD, but we've never actually listened to any of it with commentary. The idea that never actually occurred to me. So that might actually be interesting to do.
Life is too short to listen to all of these again with commentary. I don't know how people have the time for it.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I would certainly like to do, but I just don't really see a realistic time to do it. But hey, how about that company promotion?
Yeah, so we see Satellite 5, which is where the story takes place. And it's this satellite, what, 500 floors was it? Yeah, because the 500th floor had walls of gold, apparently, which just sounds like such an obvious... Like, one, even if they had walls of gold, so what? Like, they're the walls. It's not like it's given to you. Like, it could just have, like, office cubicles. Like, you just,
what do you prefer to walk in beauty?
No.
Okay.
Because walk. So I don't even know why that impressed people. I truly don't. But I guess you never saw it. Satellite 5 is basically a news broadcasting station. They package the news, they program, and then they send the news out and inform the Earth on news of what's happening in the galactic civilizations.
And pretty much all the news from Earth comes from Satellite 5. That's correct, right?
I believe so, yes. I mean, if there were other news stations, I don't know how...
Well, I mean, I imagine there's like Satellite 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah, but they might not do news. They might just do, like, game shows.
I think there's going to overtime later on.
I think they do, too. But see, one of the things you see in the news is about the solar flare, which is funny because that's part of what destroyed the Earth probably long ago at this point. I don't even know in the timeline of the Ark in Space. I didn't even think to look into that. But, the Ark in Space, the Beast Below, which we previously mentioned, they left Earth to do solar flares. So I'm assuming that took place in the past. But nonetheless, another thing we see in the news was what I mentioned before, the Face of Bo got pregnant, and we met the Face of Bo in the End of the World, and we will see the Face of Bo again, maybe sooner than people imagine.
And just to clarify, by meeting, none of the characters seem to act. Well, the Doctor might have had a few words with him. I'm not sure that happened off screen, but from what we saw, none of the characters really met the Face of Bo. We just happen to see him, and he looks notable. I mean, he's not one of those faces you forget.
I mean, he's a giant fish in a jar. I would think you forget him.
He does tend to stand out.
But yeah, the people who live on this new satellite, and by the way, they live on it. They live where they walk. They live, they eat, they walk all on the same floor. Once they get processed, I think I was on floor, 14 or something. They get sent to the floor they walk on, and that's just where they live. So that sounds like a great job. I'm guessing they probably don't get paid very well. It's a very company sap-like.
Well, I was going to say it's a nice like company town type thing.
Yeah, basically, that's what it sounds like.
If you're curious, I'm not sure if they have this type of... I'm sure they do. I'm just not that familiar with British history. But if you look in some American history, and there's some fascinating company towns. We live in Indiana, and Gary, Indiana is somewhat well known. It used to be among the most violent cities in the country. Now, because they pretty much have no population, it's died down a bit. But Gary itself is a company town to begin with, and it's just fascinating if you read into the history of that. And that's exactly what this type of thing feels like.
So when the Doctor approaches these two people to ask questions, of course he has, the Doctor has no idea what's going on because he doesn't think to figure it out. Well, to be fair, I guess he thought he knew, and then he got confused because nothing is how he thought it would be. An interesting question is how the Doctor knows that this is supposed to be the fourth and great and bond of the human empire, when if he had arrived here to fix it, fix it in quotation marks, as we'll see, then it would have just stayed this way, and it would have been the fourth great and wonderful human empire that he heard of in the past. So that just gets into more time travel questions, which nobody has any good answers for.
Hey, maybe people do, and you just haven't seek them out yet.
Right.
We should mention that these two people who the Doctor approaches, I think both of them are somewhat notable. One's name is Suki, and she is played by Anna Maxwell Martin. The other is Kathika, who is played by Christine Adams.
Yeah, I thought they did pretty well with the roles they had. So the Doctor just approaches these two, Suki and Kathika, and he just says, "I'm sorry, I'm an idiot. Where are we?" As the Doctor's usual spiel goes. Surprisingly, no, actually, never mind. He does use his psychic paper. I forgot about that. To convince them that he is basically a mystery sapper. Which is one of the many banes of the existence of a retail workers, and I work retail, so.
Do you guys still actually have mystery shoppers?
Yeah, we have mystery sappers.
They actually stopped doing
every
it
week.
Maya, but
well, maybe they started, but no, we have one coming every week to report on how we do, and we get paid less than 15 an hour. But anyway, so hey, maybe this is a company town, But the Doctor convinces them, oh yeah, no, he works, well, the mystery shoppers don't work for corporate, but nonetheless, he convinces them that he works for corporate, and so they answer all of his questions, whether they seem really stupid or not, because they want to give a very good impression so they can get a promotion. And one of the fun things is apparently our work is a voting company promotion, so they have to give a good spiel to what they think is somebody who works for corporate.
And it's fun because we're not going to talk about this too much, but there's another character Adam later speaks to who works in the medical side of things. And I get the sense that that position's very much based on commission.
Yeah, with the way that she was
given the hard sell.
She really was.
Even I wanted to pick one up. So I get the sense that both company promotion and commission, this is just a society of people who are greed is one of the things I think a lot of them have in common. And I'm not saying that's a negative thing for them, because it's just a society they happen to live in. And if that's what the society you live in, you have to deal with it. But a lot of these people just strike me as thinking about money first and foremost. And I think it's pretty obvious with characters like Kathika and that woman who was trying to get Adam to buy that heart implant.
Yeah, Kathika was really, really angling forward into the 500th floor, where once again the walls were made of gold. And for some reason, that's impressive. But she doesn't get it. She apparently isn't good enough. And what Kathika also doesn't get is she doesn't even, again, this is what we talked about before. The people in the civilization actually really is a lot like the beast below, because they asked the thing to ask these questions. But they're different questions, but they're important, questions. But she knows that aliens exist. It's the year 200,000. It's not like they're hidden. But there's no aliens on the satellite. But she doesn't even question it. She says, oh, some immigrations have tightened up due to security threats. She can't really name it the threats. Oh, but apparently there have been threats. Just nameless, various threats. And space warping has dabbled to keep visitors away. But basically, there's no aliens, and no one questions it, and she doesn't even think about it until the Doctor asks about it.
And what makes this even more damning, because you can't blame some random citizen for not thinking about something. These people are quote-unquote reporters.
And journalists.
They're supposed to deal with news.
They're supposed to ask questions.
And when the Doctor asks, why are there any aliens here? You can see there's like a slight delay. Well, they're not banned or anything. She never once considered it.
Yeah, it's very obviously never thought about it once in her life.
And she just gave excuses like James mentioned, the whole immigration thing. And then she mentions that the Casta space warping has doubled, and that might keep some more visitors away. It is excuses that allow her to not actually question any of this. And it's at this point, I think I made the point when we were watching it. It seemed, who's to say it was intentional? It may have been, but it seemed like a critique on journalism, especially modern day journalism in the West.
Yeah, the Western mainstream media, it works on the idea of wanting to be insiders. They need to kind of cozy up to the people in power. They need to play ball. They need to be nice so they can have their interviews, so they can come on their news stations, so they can be at the White House and ask questions in person And they just have to be nice about it. They have to be respectful. They can't muddy the waters with hard questions, as if any of them have thought of a hard question in their lives. It's kind of like what, and I'm not the biggest fan of Noam Chomsky, but Noam Chomsky's talked about this because Western media, a lot of the people who are high in Western media, come up through schools, and it's just a normal thing that this is how it's done. You don't ask hard questions, generally speaking. You just play ball if you want to be these type of news people. And there's some who aren't like that, of course, but they actually do have their own source. At least if they have their own source, they don't have people like modern day politicians come out with their source. They just do their commentary.
Yeah, so this is one of the things that's not, you have to think about it later to get the full picture. Because on the surface, it doesn't sound necessarily negative, like, oh, being respectful, what's wrong with that? But when these reporters and these news stations are doing this just to be able to
have access.
Yeah, just to keep that access, it's a problem because they almost never ask particularly hard questions. I'm assuming it's much the same way in the UK, though I imagine in some ways it's probably different given the BBC is state-owned, but
publicly owned.
Well, yeah, publicly owned. But in the US, with big news stations like CNN and NPR,
NPR might be state-owned too.
They might be, but the point being, they still want the access, and even worse than that, they want to maintain the status quo. And when you want to maintain a status quo, that's an inherent bias in the system.
Yeah, because the status is not quo, as we learned from Dr. Hobo's sing-along blog.
So
I quite agree with this.
Yeah. So reporters are theoretically supposed to ask how difficult questions. Actually, here's a random reference that may not do much for many people, but there was a show on HBO, The Newsroom, which wasn't an amazing show, but they was decent. They had some decent episodes. And there's this whole subplot about the moms in the newsroom wanting to host a presidential debate. And so they held a mock debate showing the RNC, the Republican National Committee, what the debate would look like if they got to host it. And they were asking these hard-hitting questions. I remember one in particular, like, hey, you say God wanted you to run. How did God speak to you? Did you hear his voice, or was it just mentally? and that's an exact question, because there's some politicians here who say, hey, God wants me to run.
Oh, so that Mr. Bachman?
I think it was either Bachman or maybe Santorum.
Might have been both. God's indecisive.
And now that's something that may not happen much in the UK. I know you guys have your conservatives over in the UK. Just look at UKIP. But some of the conservatives here in the US are absolutely, in my opinion, batshit insane, especially on the whole religious thing. Oh, God wants me to do this. And if there's a politician who says that, it's a legitimate question to ask, hey, how did God tell you? On the newsroom, they did not get that debate because the questions were too hard-hitting. And then you see footage of the actual debate. And I believe it was CNN who asked this question to Michelle Bachmann, and she was one of the candidates running in the 2012 Republican primary. Who do you prefer, Elvis or Johnny Cash? So we could have had hard-hitting questions, or we get to learn who they prefer to listen to, Elvis or Johnny Cash. And it's that type of thing that the media, this access journalism in this country gets us. Just yesterday, I saw an interview with Trump, and the guy was like, hey, I read your book and it's really good, and you're one of the most powerful people I've ever had the privilege to speak to. How the hell can you get actual hard-hitting questions from journalists, quote-unquote journalists like that? It's just disgusting.
Yeah, it's not going to get you any actual knowledge about the candidate. It's just basically propping them up.
Yeah, it's like fluff pieces. That's how a lot of the stuff is.
Yeah, when they ask hard-hitting questions, it's to people like Bernie Sanders. It's to people like Tulsi Gabbard. Well, I'm not saying Tulsi's good. I'm just saying they ask these questions to more outsidery candidates to discredit them.
As I said earlier, just a way to maintain the status quo. And all of this is, and it might seem like a sidestep, it's Brothers Mahoney speak politics and media, but all of this ties directly into this story that this so-called journalist never thought to ask, hey, why aren't there any aliens here on Satellite 5? And she never considered it. A question never came to mind. And I have to imagine that's what a lot of journalists in this country deal with quite a bit. There's questions that should be asked that they never even consider asking. And it's just atrocious.
Yeah, and that's what Noam Chomsky talked about. That the journalists are just raised in this type of environment where the status quo is such that they don't even think to ask other questions outside of it. There's a pretty good interview where he kind of coups a journalist, I think back in the 80s. We didn't even know about some CIA coups because he just never looked into it because he never thought about it. So it's pretty indicative of the entire mainstream journalist thing we have going on here.
And also, relates somewhat. I thought it was sort of a funny scene. But we mentioned that Adam was speaking to someone hoping to get an implant in his heart. And we'll talk a little bit about why. Comes down to he wants some information. When he goes to the floor to get this implant, he says that he is from the University of Mars. And the woman he's speaking to sort of rolls her eyes, makes mention of the, quote, Martian boondocks. them primitive Martian boondocks people. Which, one, I thought was sort of funny. It's sort of like how some Americans might see the Deep South, like, oh, those uncultured Southerners. And one, it sort of makes me feel bad for our Ice Warrior friends, because Mars should be their domain, but it seems like humans have spread that far too, and I have to imagine in doing so they probably got rid of any remaining Ice Warriors.
Well, to be fair, apparently the sun is radioactive to the Ice Warriors, at least at the point of Ra Down. I don't know when Ra Down took. I mean, again, this is 200,000, so I'm assuming the Ice Warriors, unless there's some people who want to come back to the place where they came from. I'm assuming they just had other planets to enjoy, hypothetically.
Yeah, I like to think that they survived throughout humanity.
I would expect they do, because we saw them as those ambassadors in the Paladin episodes of Pottery.
And as atrocious as this society seems to be, I mean, not from the regular citizens' viewpoint.
To be fair, we don't see regular citizens. Are the people here out walking for Satellite 5?
That is true. For all we know, maybe there is a decent subsection on the planet who do have big problems with this. But we at least know that our Sam, because this made mention of the Freedom 15 and also the Freedom Foundation. This is one of the things that isn't delved into quite as deeply as I would like, because I'm assuming the Freedom 15 founded the Freedom Foundation.
I would assume so.
But I don't know. It throws these names out without any context. It does mention that the Freedom 15 are anarchists who believe that the news is being manipulated. And the news is indeed being manipulated. But I'm not sure if you decided, but yeah, something is wrong here. And they want to try to get evidence to prove that. I sort of wonder what would happen then if they could even get that information out. But that's a different question.
They could use underground zines or zines. But yeah, I don't know how that was actually going to work for them. I don't know if they're anarchists. I don't think they think that far hard.
Oh snap! It's getting real. Oh yeah, actually, James did make a joke during the episode that if they were Marxists, they could actually get this done.
I did make the joke. I'm not sure if it was a joke.
He enjoys insulting anarchists when we are our brothers and sisters in the movement.
Right. I mean, I did the same thing during the Dominators. So, but I guess that was more about the people who think
pacifists.
Pacifists, yeah. Nonetheless, though, my point remains valid.
Hey, it's a leftist infighting.
24/7. So, one of the people here, I don't know, should we say who it is or not?
I mean, I suspect most people have seen this, but I wasn't going to mention it. It doesn't really matter. It's just one of the characters we meet in this episode happens to be...
Yeah, the last surviving member of the Freedom 15, which is a pretty cool group name.
And they sort of get discovered and they get promoted, because promotion's not quite what you might think it is. They get promoted to Floor 500. They go up. There ain't no golden walls there.
There is a glorious creature known as Max, but that's not his name, is it, Michael?
No, it is not. They call him the mighty geographers of the holy hydrogastic Maxaradolfo Din 4. Along those lines. Now, luckily, we just call him Max for short. And by we, I mean our guy Simon Pegg. It's sort of nice seeing a bigger face in Doctor Who. And Simon Pegg's been in a decent amount of things. I personally know him best from Shaun of the Dead, which was a 2004 zombie comedy movie. Perhaps one of the most well-known zombie comedy movies in recent years. And I think he's really good there. But he's been in other movies too. And Simon Pegg's a big name, so it's sort of fun to see him here. And he does a pretty fun job playing a character just called the Editor.
Yeah, and apparently Simon Pegg's a big fan of Doctor Who. Well, he's British, a lot of them are. And he would have jumped out. He was originally going to play Rose Taller's father in Father's Day, which would have been...
Yeah, that would have been interesting. It actually probably would have worked just as fine too.
Well, it's actually probably a good idea that he didn't because the guy shows up later. So, and Simon Pegg is a bigger actor, so he might not have had the time to show up in the other episodes.
But naturally, the Doctor and Rose make the way to floor 500 all because of those pipes and plumbing.
Yeah, because they ask questions that nobody asked. To be fair, they had access to things they weren't supposed to have access to, but that's neither here nor there. That's also what journalists are supposed to do.
Yeah, journalists are supposed to push buttons, sort of, especially if you're an investigative journalist. You're supposed to investigate. They probably don't have anything called investigative journalism in this society, or if they do, they definitely don't actually investigate.
No, they do not.
Yeah, or they just investigate what they're told to investigate, which is, by the way, not how investigative journalism should work. But the Doctor and Rose make their way to floor 500. They meet the Mighty Jagrophus, which is this amorphous blob-type shaped thing hanging off the ceiling.
I mean, it has a mouth, so...
Well, yeah, I mean, it has some distinguishable features. We don't really learn much about what it wants, per se, so it's just trying to manipulate...
Well, they did mention that it was a consortium of banks who ran Satellite 5. I assume it's just because the banks wanted more money, so capitalism.
Yeah, putting banks in charge. Yeah, putting banks in charge of NuWho is such a great idea, guys.
Well, to be fair though, I think they were secretly backing it, so it's not like they knew that they were in charge. So it's just a secret consortium of banks. At least that's what they say so far. I don't know. Maybe bosses have bosses, and maybe we find out about those bosses later.
Yeah, it's true. We actually get the question: is a slave if he doesn't know he's enslaved?
Which is an obvious yes, which the Doctor says automatically, which kind of pits the editor who posed the question off. You see, we're in a nice philosophical discussion. But the Doctor was in the mood to discuss philosophy with the mouthpiece of the Jagrophus, apparently.
I mean, we all have our limits, and he just, I guess, met his.
Apparently so.
Yeah, it should go without saying, being episode 7 of the first season of a show that has now 14 seasons, that the Doctor does manage to survive this. So he does indeed defeat the Mighty Jagrophus and the Adidor. Well, doesn't necessarily need to defeat the Adidor. The Adidor just tries to resign, but boy, does that not quite work.
It does not. I like the moxie of trying to resign in that situation.
Yeah, he tried. So they're actually able to defeat the creature that was manipulating the news, and the Doctor, well, I guess even before that, the Doctor finds out about what Adam's been up to. Do you want to briefly talk about what Adam's been up to?
Yeah, to recap Adam's joining this, he wants to send some information of this era back to his home phone because he was able, Rose was kind, she let him call his mom back in 2012, and he just kept the phone on him. And from very early on, he apparently got the idea, I'm just going to send information from the computers on here, like, tell me a lot of information, that's way in our future.
Yeah, I think he specifically wanted the history of the microchip.
Yeah, and to start with, I'm sure he would have taken a lot more. To be fair, they don't do anything with in this episode, but according to the last episode, the guy's a genius. So I'm sure even from a non-monetary point of view, it would have fascinated him anyway. But the episode doesn't really go into why he wanted to do it. I would theorize that, again, there was the whole thing about one of his parents having some medical issue. But they don't go into that. They don't say anything about that. So I just assume it's either personal interest or monetary reasons.
And that's another one of the reasons why I think this episode should have been longer.
Yeah, to flush this out. They should have really had Adam around a lot longer than just one story. Because the whole companion who doesn't work out idea is great, but I don't think I don't think it's best if they don't work out in the very next story after they get picked up. Like, give them time to breathe a little, and then have them fail.
Yeah, but as Adam's getting this deep information download, trying to learn himself some things, at least it sounds like they forget the information as soon as it's done, but at least he'll have the information in his head.
Sure, be able to translate it. I'm not sure how he thought that was going to work.
But while he's doing that, he's sort of incapacitated, and unfortunately he has the TARDIS key with him. So the Adidor and the Mighty Jagrophus are almost able to get the TARDIS key, and you can imagine that if they were able to get the TARDIS key, and they would have access to
changing history from the very beginning.
Yeah,
something about making sure humans never developed. Although I'm not sure how much sense that actually makes, because I'm not sure the bosses would actually have approved of that plan.
And
actually, maybe they were angling for the promotion.
Yeah, we'll talk a little later on, and by a little later on, I mean when we bring up the reality bomb, because
Well, the reality bomb has nothing to do with this.
no, nothing to do with this, but it has to do with I just
I see what you mean. Okay.
yeah, it's the same type of thing. There's some villainous and antagonistic plans that just don't make any sense to me.
No, I understood the reality bomb.
I
That,
sort of,
no, that makes sense to me. We'll discuss that there.
but we'll talk about that. Yeah, we'll talk about that then. But yeah, I don't entirely get the Dragonfost's plan if he would get the TARDIS, but the fact that he could even have the chance to get the TARDIS naturally pisses the Doctor off.
Yeah, and it was all Adam's fault.
Yeah. But luckily, like I said, Rose and the Doctor are able to defeat the Dragonfrost, and then they just make their way home. The Doctor sort of destroyed the station. Well, not the station's fine, but he destroyed the management of the station. He says that the human race should be able to get back to normal, but he can't do anything. He never does. He quote hates tidying up. So
There's too many questions apparently.
yeah, too many questions. Just hates tidying up, and we see that all the time.
Yeah, we see all the time, and people wonder why. Well, maybe nobody wonders why, but there's a lot of conspiracy theories involved with this guy. A lot of myths involved with the Doctor throughout history. There's some guy shows up, things happen, and he leaves. And he never answers anything.
Yeah, and so he just leaves, and then he drops Adam off at home.
In a very interesting filmed way too.
Yeah, so they like walk into the TARDIS door, and then sort of walk out of the door, like in the instantaneous cut outside of or inside his apartment or his mother's apartment. It looks interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. But the Doctor was holding on to Adam the same way as he was. He was like holding him on by the sword, but he was holding him in the same way as he was when he walked on. And while it looks nice or not, he still has to pilot the TARDIS. So, but he's just holding Adam the entire time. That was uncomfortable.
Like it looks cool, but questioning it maybe not the best logical choice, but
it looked cool
because of Adam's actions. And Rose doesn't really stick up for him. You can't blame Rose.
No, I mean, Rose is pretty.
To be fair, early on, the Doctor sort of making fun of Rose and, oh, hey, it's your first date with Adam. You know, there you kids go. But Adam himself, Adam ain't no fool. He tells Rose it's not really a competition between him and the Doctor. The Doctor's going to win.
Well, he was saying that just so he could leave and try out this idea to get information.
I sort of think it's stupid. So he probably knew it was still true. He used that truth to his advantage, or what he hoped would be his advantage. Yeah, so they drop Adam off. He still has an implant in his heart,
which is activated by snapping. And not even snapping your own fingers, anybody can snap it open, which is a design flaw.
Which Adam soon finds out.
Yeah, because the Doctor and Rose, just snap and like his heart opens. But more importantly, Adam finds out when his mother comes home and the opposite ends with the mother snapping, and obviously I would assume his device opening and then her screaming. Actually, I don't know if she screams.
And by snapping, just like sort of clicking, snapping your fingers.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what our snapping could mean, but I can see something like, hey, you've been snapping today. I don't know. But that's
maybe Snapchat, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. But that sort of ends with the mother sort of clicking her fingers, and then she screams because, as you can imagine, we don't see it, but as you can imagine, she sees what her child has become.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, Adam shows up again in Doctor Who lore in a trial issue says Prisoners of Time, which was produced by IDW, which did a lot of, I believe they were the ones who do a lot of the Doctor Who comics, I don't know. I like Doctor Who, but we don't have the comic books, alas. Well, we don't have a lot of them. I think IDW does a lot of the comic books in the United States. But it was to celebrate the Doctor's 50th anniversary. So it was just released monthly throughout 2013, this series. And Adam is, I might be spoiling it for people, so I'm sorry, but he is the main antagonist. And that's rather impressive that this, not really one-off because he appeared in 2 episodes, but this small bit character basically becomes important. And that's what I like about Doctor Who lore, how they just brought him back and made him into something.
Yeah, it's fun that they brought Adam back. We mentioned previously that Adam did appear in a audio drama. I forget the name of it, but that one sort of took place between Dalek and this toy, naturally.
Well, yeah, and as listeners to our show know, we enjoy looking at the personal timelines for each Doctor on the TARDIS Wiki. They have a page for each Doctor on anybody else you could imagine, basically. And this does include just the classic series and NuWho, but also the extensive extended media, ranging from the comic books, the comic strips, Big Finish, BBC audio, multiple book ranges, and everything in between, including the various video games that exist. Doctor Who canon is a complete mess. They don't really try to keep anything in track, so other people have to. And it's just fun to see where the stories we're discussing fit into the universe as a whole. That's why we were discussing other times that the Earth had empires, like Planet of the Ood and etc. They got this fascinating thing about the universe as a cohesive entity, which it is hypothetically supposed to be. And so this story takes place after the big finish, the Ninth Doctor Chronicles 3, which was a collection of 3 Ninth Doctor stories. And this one was entitled The Other Side. This came out in May 2017, so it was before they had Christopher Eccleston do voice acting on Big Finish. They eventually did get him back, but this is the Ninth Doctor Chronicles was before. I believe Nicholas Briggs was doing a Christopher Eccleston impersonation. So that just took place in between Dalek and The Long Game. And right after this, there was apparently some thing in the Doctor Who magazine annual. I'm not sure quite what it was. It was kind of half story, half interactive game. But ignoring that, after this is just Father's Day, which we'll be discussing in upcoming episode. And Father's Day is very fascinating.
Yeah, and as always, that's fun. When it comes to The Long Game, I think I'll just say what I said before. A serialized version of the show would have benefited this story quite a bit if they had actually made this story during Sylvester McCoy's time, for instance. That probably would have been, in my opinion, quite a bit better. Maybe these special effects would have been as good, but to be fair, it's not like the hard thing opening up on Adam looked particularly great.
They said the early 2000s CGI are all run throughout this story, which I'm okay with, but I mean, that doesn't mean it looks great.
Yeah, but if you had a choice between better CGI or a more fleshed out story, I mean, I have to imagine most people would go for the fleshed out story.
I would hope so.
And I just wish I like a lot of the ideas of this story, but I wish they fleshed it out a bit more.
Yeah, if it had room to marinate, to let the ideas come about and actually be discussed by the characters in the story besides just kind of in snippet form.
Yeah, I think because of that, I understand why this is seen as one of the weaker episodes, one of the weakest episodes of the first season. Because I've been thinking throughout this discussion, and I think I actually do prefer the Unquiet Dad. Yeah, I think I do prefer the Unquiet Dad, because that story at least seemed a bit more fleshed out than this one does. This one has such interesting ideas and concepts
that just can't be fleshed out in the time it gave.
Yeah, it should have either been made a 2-part. They should have done something else. I still like the episode, but I do get why people call it one of the weakest of the season. And it's not a bad episode. It's just, to me, it's not nearly as good as some of the best the season can do.
Yeah, so I said in our Dalek discussion that I like The Long Game more than Dalek. Now, that might have been premature. The Long Game, as Michael said, it has a lot of good ideas in it. And overall, I do like it more than The Unquiet Dad. But I just didn't have enough time. I mean, it's still a good episode. I had fun with it. I think it's a great setup episode. A very important episode. Even if the story is not great, all of it is important setup for the season finale. So on that alone, it's important. But I wish there had been a 2-parter or something akin to that. Now, we are going to have a 2-parter coming up, and it's a very good 2-parter. But this should also have been a 2-parter. Yeah, maybe they should have done that Peter Capaldi season early, whereas our 2-parters. Although those were very, very mixed in how good they were.
Yeah, and that's a risk you always run with a 2-parter. Sometimes,
a lot of the Doctor Who 2-parters tend to start off really strong and then do not land as well in the second part, at least in my point of view.
Yeah, but there are some very notable exceptions, like the Impossible Planet, the Satan Pit, Human Nature, Family of Blood, or even like we'll be discussing, Empty Child, the Doctor Dances. I think some of them do work out really well, and then some others sort of fall flat, like you say. But yeah, The Long Game, not a great episode, but I still don't think it's bad. It just needed a bit more work, a bit more story thrown in. But naturally, I'm curious, just let us know what you think about it, if you have any strong thoughts one way or the other. Maybe if you watched this when it first aired and never watched Doctor Who since. If that happened, I'd be sort of curious how you found our podcast. Yeah, not a great episode, but let us know your thoughts. Comment below here on YouTube. Maybe make a comment on Twitter. And we do, on the side note, have a Twitter at Brothers Mahoney, if anybody is interested in following us. Before we close out, James, what do we have coming up next?
Next, we have the 10th Big Finish audio in the main range, Winter for the Adapt, starring Peter Davison as the Fifth Doctor, of course, and Sarah Sutton as Nyssa, and interestingly enough, written by Andrew Cartmel, who was behind the very well-known, if maybe over-exaggerated, Cartmel Master Plan in the 1980s. So that's fascinating.
Yeah, and we have seen the Fifth Doctor with Nyssa once before in audio form being Land of the Dead, which we both rather enjoyed. So it should be fun to see another, sounds like it's another wintry type story. I don't remember much about the plot, but it should be fun. Who does it like the Fifth Doctor and Nyssa?
The Ride Down was fun, but the Fifth Doctor was, as part of the course of the Fifth Doctor, to me he was a bit bland. But hopefully we'll see some improvement in this Fifth Doctor story.
Yeah, and I suspect Nyssa probably works better with the Fifth Doctor than Perry does, but that is something that we will see. So yeah, next up we have Winter for Adapt, and what do you thank you for listening? I'm Michael.
And I'm James.
We've been the Brothers Mahoney. Have yourself a pleasant day.